I am Denise Griffitts, and this is your partner in Success Radio. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Tom DuFore. He is the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, and that's an award-winning consulting firm that has helped more than 600 businesses grow through franchising. I love to hear about franchising. And Tom is an entrepreneur, a franchise expert, and he's the author of Virtuous Business, a Model Approach, and the host of the podcast Multiply Your Success. Today, we are sponsored by Frederick J. Fisher. As entrepreneurs grow their businesses, protecting what they've built becomes just as important as building it. And Frederick J. Fisher of Fisher Consulting Group works with professionals, business owners, and organizations to identify and manage risks that can impact their success. Through his expertise in professional liability, risk management, and claims prevention, Frederick helps leaders make smarter decisions to protect their reputation, their assets, and the businesses that they have worked so hard to build. And you can find his book. I have it here. He's been my guest, and this book is terrific. It's called Claims Made Insurance, the policy that changed the industry, a deep dive review and history, and you can find it on Amazon. Now back to my guest, Tom DuFore. Throughout his career, Tom has advised well-known brands, including Jamba Juice. I even know what that one is. Two Men and a Truck, I've heard of that one as well, and Matco Tools. I've heard of them. I'm surprised. While helping entrepreneurs determine whether franchising is the right path for sustainable growth. And his leadership philosophy centers on building win-win relationships, professional excellence, and continuous improvement. So if you've ever wondered whether your business is ready to scale through franchising, or how to stay, or how to grow rather, while staying true to your core values, you want to stay with us and listen. Tom, welcome to your Partner in Success Radio, and thank you for sharing your absolutely gorgeous book with me. It's on my desk as we speak.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. I'm honored to be here and appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation.
Me too, and I love franchising. I'm so fascinated by it. But I told you in the green room, I have to say this to the audience. I opened the box that this book came in. I went, oh my God, that thing is beautiful. Wait till you see it. Go look for it on Amazon. Virtuous Business, a Model Approach. It's beautiful. And you know what? The content's not that bad either. There's a lot of wonderful stuff in here. But Tom, tell us about you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Your intro was a great overview on my background, and I've been coming up here. I've been married 21 years to my wonderful wife. We have three great kids, and being doing all of life and coupling that with being an entrepreneur, an author, and pursuing completing my doctoral studies. And really, the doctoral studies is what led to what eventually became the Virtuous Business book that I co-authored with a couple co-authors. But my doctoral thesis centered around how to measure, or how do you measure an organization's virtuousness. And so that's what kind of prompted and got me to this point here.
And I wanted to ask you about the title because when I read it, well, you and I had talked, we'd had a pre-interview, and you told me about the title. And then when I started looking at it, like I said, it's Virtuous Business, a Model Approach. But it also says, and it's kind of a subtitle, I think, Ethics, Essays rather, and Exemplars. So ethics is a big part of this book, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And really the virtuous business idea is centered around this business framework that was developed by Indiana Wesleyan University. And that's where I pursued my doctoral studies. And part of the reason I chose that university was because of this business framework they have. And in looking at this idea of the virtuous business model and the framework that was produced, that part of the ethics or the idea behind it is to say, to look at doing business essentially with character, right? People will say character counts and character matters, and things of that nature with the idea of character. And we talk about developing our kids, right? You think of raising your children or nieces and nephews or friends. You'd hope that they have good character, and then you go to business school and you go to all different kinds of things that happen. And certainly many business schools today incorporate business ethics programs. into it. But this idea of virtuous business is really tied and centered around virtue ethics and the idea of developing yourself and having this personal character that filters through how you conduct business as a professional. So it's not just personal, it's also professional. And so that was some of the impetus to this, is to say that virtuous business, there are that you can take a look at growing and building a business to answer really this idea of, can you be profitable and have principles in a business? And my conclusion, my co-authors and I, our conclusion is you can have both. It's not one or the other. And that's part of the idea of the book and this virtuous business framework, is that it's designed to help convey to the reader and to someone coming in that it doesn't have to be an either or. And sometimes I think in business, we've been led to believe that, well, it's profit or nothing, or sometimes on the other end, for instance, for a nonprofit to say, well, if it's all for some virtuous endeavor that we're striving to achieve, but forget about the profitability on it. And I look at both instances and say, well, why not both? Why do we have to have this either or thinking? And so the book itself is established in a framework, is broken into three central parts of the book itself. Part one, and this gets into a bit of the ethics portion, is an ethics discussion to talk about virtue ethics and some of the differences between some of the other ethical types. Virtue ethics, deontology or duty-based, where it's, I have a duty or I have an obligation to fulfill this, and utilitarianism, which is the idea of utility. What's the greatest good for the most number of people? To kind of summarize the three of those. And virtue is about character, right? And doing the right thing and having these virtues that you live by, and being disciplined around that. So those are the three major philosophical or ethical approaches that you can take. And by the way, anyone that ends up listening to this, Denise, and myself included on this, and being a part of this, we incorporate those ethical decisions or philosophical ideas into decisions we make every day, and we do it subconsciously. We oftentimes don't even know that we're doing it, but we are. Usually one of those three are kind of the primary driver for a wide variety of decisions we'll end up making today and tomorrow, most of them inconsequential decisions, right? And when we start thinking about the idea of ethics, most people start thinking about when it's a large or a large decision, something that's going to have significant impact or larger impact. But we very often it's the accumulation of these small decisions and small things that we do over time. So part one of the book is about ethics, and just to set a base foundation for where this is coming from. Part two of the book then gets into the virtuous business model and breaking this down into essays. It's an overview on the virtuous business model, and then we get into essays and exemplars in that section. And the essays are important. They're short mini essays. They're maybe 2 to 4 pages each. And the goal with the essays is just to have more of a conversation and add color to ideas, some of these philosophical ideas, ethical ideas, morals. And by the way, there's sometimes a debate over, well, are morals and ethics the same thing, and how do you define them? For the sake of our book, and to avoid that debate, we just said we're going to use ethics and morals interchangeably for the sake of this conversation that we have in the book. And so we think that having these essays are an important component to help really display or communicate what these virtues are and how they work. And what makes this framework for the virtuous business model unique is that there are two core frameworks or two core components. There's the virtuous leader that's part of the virtuous business model, and then a virtuous organization. And so, and one person, someone might say, well, how can you have a virtuous organization, right? I mean, it's a thing. It's not a living thing, is it? And well, it's a collection of people, right? An
Right.
organization is just
So it is a
yeah,
living thing.
yeah.
If you're all gathered together and by and large you're in agreement about how you're going to behave and the decisions you make and how you treat your customers or your clients, it's a living organization, I
That
think.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's how we view it as well, as in saying how can we create the an environment where we have uh, as many virtuous leaders that are a part of it, and so and most people, we're all leading someone, we're following people in various stages of every day, certain parts of the day, and other parts of the day we're leading others, and so the virtuous leader is broken down into, and we look at a virtuous business is being, you can't have just, if you're a virtuous business, you're not just, it can't just be the leader at the top, and then it's just kind of everyone else is doing whatever. And at the same regard, it's not just organizationally it's virtuous, and then you have a leader, and we've seen the headlines of uh, 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 CEOs and presidents of large corporations that have made some bonehead decisions that just you think back and say, what were they thinking when they did that? I can't believe they made that decision as they go through
Budweiser
that. So we
comes to mind.
yeah, yeah, all of these different groups, or the Volkswagen CEO, and hiding data, and yeah, to mislead things, and it's we think of these uh, uh, kind of horror stories or examples of that are terrifying, but most of my work in my career has been spent working with small businesses, and very often these are not decisions or things you're going to read in the news. It's not going to be the leading headline in a newspaper or anything. But there, meanwhile, we're all contributing, each of us to this organization, to the character of what's going on. And so we look at a virtuous leader that we like to start with, and there are three main parts to that virtuous leader. There's the professional. Um, we have our professional piece, right? What we do, it's like you meet someone, they ask, well, what do you do? And you describe, or you talk about the products or services you sell, or what you're involved with. And then there's the personal side of the individual leader. And then there's the spiritual component. And what makes a virtuous business model unique is we consider and include this spiritual component, whether and it doesn't necessarily mean from a religious standpoint. It just there is a spirituality to all of us, and we find it somewhere, some way. And so we talk about these three pieces of the leader and how we develop a leader of character in each of these elements. And so part of the book is talking through each of these. And under the professional, personal, and spiritual, there are three virtues or characteristics that we've identified, and we expand upon throughout the book. And then we look at the virtuous organization, and similarly, there are three domains that we take a look at, and it's structured similarly to the virtuous leader. So for virtuous organization, we have economic capital. We look at capital for a business: economic capital, social capital, and spiritual capital. So we can think of economic capital as things that are driving, oftentimes, financial engines of the business that are going through. And social capital are the relationships between people within the organization and outside of the organization, various stakeholders of the organization. And then spiritual capital, you can think of things like how a business is, for example, perceived. How are they perceived externally, and how aligned culturally are the behaviors of the business with the values that they're expounding or that they're sharing publicly. And you may have worked at, Denise, or someone who tunes into this. I know I have at times been a part of a company where the values and the mission and the all the stuff that's printed up on the website and on the walls of the business and so on don't necessarily match up with the behavior of the business. And so it's not congruent, and it creates, really, for the staff and team that work there, a cognitive dissonance. It says, well, you're saying this, but you're doing that. It's the two aren't matched up. And so when they're aligned, spiritual capital flourishes, right? This idea, and you find that those are organizations that people love working for, can't wait to work for, are thrilled that they're talking about this to their friends at 4th of July parties and at holiday parties and things that are going on that they're attending around. So these ideas are what make up the virtuous business model. And in the book, we have an essay on every single one of these, just a mini essay. So it's a quick read. And the purpose of the essays is really when we get to the third portion of the book, which to me is the heart of the book, is where we have over 300 discussion questions that's built in there. And the book's not designed necessarily to give answers. It's really to set some foundational information and to open up a discussion, to get people, hopefully, at a business, in an organization, in a department, to get this moving, to get this started, and have these conversations internally to start talking about that. So those are things that the book in each just a quick example here. For example, with economic capital, one of the virtues or values is this idea of profound. And so there are 10 questions on the profound essay that we talk about. So as an example, I've just opened up the book here. Just read the first question. It says, name an organization that epitomizes being profound. Describe what needs to happen in your organization to rise to that level, to match what that example or exemplar, as we reference as part of the title. What does your company have to do to get there? And it's not saying you're going to find the solution in a quick meeting. Maybe you do, but it's to open that conversation, to just start thinking about it, and to get the conversation with your department, with your peers. If you're a small business, it could be the whole company. If you're a big business, this could be something that is shared from one department to the next to start some conversations and get some discussions going. Or it might be a group you volunteer at. It could be a small group from church. It could be a wide variety of settings to open up and start having those conversations. So that's a big part of the purpose and foundation of the book. And as we're all scholar practitioners that helped write this, we have almost 300 sources as well cited throughout. So plenty of sources and citations shared as to where this information is coming from. But a lot of the essays are built on our own lived experience and examples of others throughout. So that I guess is a summary overview of the book and some of the focus and approach that we're looking for as we go through that.
And I have to tell you, we're talking about spiritual a little bit here. One of my favorite chapters is on page 87, Spiritual Capital. And I'm going to read the opening paragraph because I sticky noted, I will not mark up a book. My childhood librarian would rear up and get me with a ruler. I wasn't Catholic and neither was she, but she would get me with a ruler anyway. So I will not mark them, but I sticky note the heck out of these books. And it starts out, in 1951, Edward R. Murrow began a 5-minute radio broadcast featuring essays from famous and everyday people. The aim was to understand what other people believe, not necessarily specific to faith, but about life. And I think that was pretty profound.
Yeah, and it was that's exactly right. And the idea was to just what are people thinking? What is this? Because the spiritual piece is sometimes hard to comprehend, and but almost everybody understands it when they're in that situation where there's a high or a high amount of spiritual capital where say, what is it about this place? It feels different. Something's different where you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it. You say, what is this? And then on the other extreme where people will say, well, something's off here and I can't quite explain it. There's something missing. Something's missing. And or something's gone awry, and the whether you're sometimes even a customer or a client of a business where you can sense it. There's something off, but you can't quite place it. And very often it tends to be that spiritual component. And I know I mentioned this a little bit about this idea of being centered. But for a business, one of the key ideas we talk about in the book, and my co-authors and I, we debated, do we put, there's an essay on the center of the virtuous business model. In the center for people of faith and for Christians is Christ. It's Christ likeness is the center. But for non-religious people, for non-Christians, what is at the center? Because what we really have a conversation about is what is the center that's driving the core decisions that you're making? What is that center? We all have something. Even people of faith, they might say it's their their spiritual, their faith or their religion, but their behavior indicates otherwise. And so we look at this and say, well, what is the center? And with this essay was originally going to be the final essay, but we actually looked at it and thought, no, this is very strong. Let's start with that to pose that question to say, what is your center? What's at the center of you as a leader or as a person? What's your center? What are you tethered to? There's something you're tethered to that's driving decisions. And then the same thing for an organization. What is this organization tethered to? And that gets back to the idea of the corporate values posted on a wall and no one's living up to them or even trying to live up to them. So the even though it says that these are our values on a wall, the behaviors don't necessarily reflect that. So how do we get to that? And so part of it is just posing the question is, what is your center? What would you want that center to be? Have you even thought about it? Because if you don't decide, well, someone else will.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
If you don't decide what is your center, right? So someone else will do it for you.
Oh, exactly. And on page 89, I sticky noted this page too. And it's the same question over and over again, but the emphasis is on a different word each time. And it says, what do you believe? And what do you believe? What do you believe? What do you believe? What do you believe? And I know that's not coming across well. You'd have to write it down, but what do you believe? Those are all the words that you need to, excuse me, to emphasize. And honestly, I'm not a religious person. I never have been, but I'm deeply spiritual. And I have a lot of different beliefs, but church, not for me. Well, for several reasons. I'm an introvert, so I don't want to be around people most of the time, but it's just I'm uncomfortable in church. I always have been. Doesn't mean I don't believe in a lot of spiritual things at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and while the book has its foundation and root in some of these ideas, or the virtuous business model does, I should say, and for its center in a faith setting. However, the intent is that this is applied universally because we all have a center. And so what is that? And to your point, I love that section of the book that you just mentioned. It's just saying, well, what do you believe? And asking that 5-6 different times with an emphasis on a different word each time to really pull out what do you believe? What are your values? What is really, really important? And it's interesting. I can give a quick example. This one's not in the book, but it's just a personal example. My wife and I, every year, at the beginning of each year, we sit down as a couple and we set goals for our family, for us personally, and for our family, and things we want to do. We don't really do it. I guess it's kind of a version of the New Year's resolution, but we do annual goal setting and planning for us, and 3, 5, and 10-year planning. And we put together a family, essentially a family mission statement, I guess, for lack of a better description, to kind of summarize, what are we doing with our marriage? What are we doing with our family? Is it just to make some money, pay our bills, feed our kids, and kind of that's it? Or is there something else we're doing collectively together? And so we had written out this. It sounded beautiful. It's like you type it. It's if you would, in today's world, this was pre-ChatGPT that we did it, but you go into an AI something or other, you type in, write a family mission statement for me, and it spits something out. And it sounds nice at first glance, but it's
But it's
generic, and
not
it doesn't
you.
really mean anything. You
It's not
got it.
you at all. You put no
Exactly.
thought in it. Your wife didn't put any thought in it. You just wrote out something that looked good, posted it up on the whiteboard, and never looked at it again.
That's right. And so we had written one kind of like that, ourselves. We'd put, it sounded nice, it looked good, and it's like, well, who are we trying to impress? It's not that we shared this with anybody. It was just the two of us that did this. And and all of a sudden, a few years ago, we looked back, because we do the first part of what we do for our planning and so on, is we do a reflection, and we look backwards. We say, well, what did we do? What did we like? And just kind of reflect on the year. I don't want to only be forward thinking or forward looking. I want to look back and reflect and learn and see what happened, and treasure some of these wonderful memories and moments that we created as a family. And so we looked back and we said, this mission and this kind of focus for us doesn't really fit what we've been saying we were going to do. And we started looking and say, well, what did we do? How did we prioritize our time throughout the year? And all of a sudden it clicked, and I wrote it out on a piece of paper. I said, well, this seems like what we've been doing. And it was a short, simple sentence. And we looked at each other, and we said, oh my, this is exactly it. And so, and now I actually remember what it actually is. And I use it now as a reminder to remind myself to say, oh, wait, this is what's important to us. And so I share it with you and your audience, but it's to create our family kind of purpose, mission statement is to create meaningful memories and experiences with our children. And that's it, to create meaningful memories and experiences with our children. And so everything we do is built, because we looked back and said, wait a minute, and as soon as we wrote that out and said that, we said, oh, that everything makes sense now. Everything makes sense. And so that became the center for our family, and saying for my wife and me. And then we created, even for within our family, 3 core values or 3 principles, or that we we run and operate our whole family off of. Every decision we make is from that kind of that statement, that family purpose statement, and that and from our 3 values. And that's what we use even in holding our kids accountable. We use these 3 values. It's we don't say, oh, well, whatever, missed curfew, or this happened or that happened. It's, well, this broke one of our values that's important to us, and here's why, to remember that. And so I think of the virtuous business model, applying kind of this principle to our personal lives. That's something that, just as an example, that my wife and I have done for our own family, and something that we found to be important.
And I wrote this down. I probably shouldn't even say it, but I did tell you that I don't know what I'm going to say until I've already said it, so be warned. But basically, I wrote down KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the easier it is to remember, that, and you find, like you said, that most often the more simple it is, it's easier to remember, it's easier to follow, and a lot of times that just sometimes makes sense when you read it. Say, oh my word, Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, finding that center, I've always described being once you find that center, then you have to not to confuse here, but you have to be centered on your center, right? So a lot of us drift and we say, well, this is our center, and then we find ourselves drifting. And so how do we keep centered? I've always described and thought of when we are as an organization or a leader and you're trying to keep your organization centered, of any kind of organization, centered on what that center point is, uh, on that vision, purpose, mission, whatever it is, whatever that truly piece is. I've always just felt and looked at it as if you had think of a ball, like a basketball or any kind of round, bouncy ball. And if you had a weighted center right in the middle, well, when you bounce that ball or toss the ball, it's going to flow. It's going to bounce evenly and be easy to work. But if that center weight gets a little out of center, and and I like the idea of a ball because it's 360 degrees, it's every angle, every side, it can get sideways in any which way. It's a three-dimensional object. Well, if that center slider moves a little bit off in one direction, well, that ball is going to wobble a whole lot, and you don't know exactly where it's going to go. And from a business setting or leading a company or leading an organization, if that ball is not if that middle weight is not centered, it's going to take that ball longer to get there. You're going to have to correct it more often. So what does that mean? Well, that means it's going to cost more time. It's going to cost more money and more resources to get to the inevitable destination that you're trying to get to. And you might not even get there. You might end up at another destination. And so it's, the analogy is to help keep that perspective as you're identifying what is that center, and then keeping that center centered to kind of keep it focused on that.
And that actually makes sense. While you were talking about the ball and, how it can go crooked, I kept thinking, you're going to break somebody's window, or your child is going to break somebody's window. And now what? That's kind of simplifying, but that's what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Somebody's window breaks, or somebody there's collateral damage along the way, right? That broken window. It's unintended, right? It's not intentional. It's not intentional. But that's what happens as we start to veer off the path, or we bring people into the organization, as an example, that and look, I'm an owner. I've run companies. I've run my own business, and as an owner in some way, shape, or form, I've been basically self-employed now for coming up on in my 15th year, and I've led companies and organizations. I've hired people, and unfortunately, letting folks go is about the worst thing I've ever had to do. It's never fun or enjoyable. And I think back to some of these instances when people, this collateral damage, sometimes it's the collateral damage of bringing the wrong person into an organization because you're just looking either for a warm body, or you're trying to, you bring someone in because they have certain skill set, but it's not a cultural fit to the business that you're running. And so that's something that we talk a lot about in the book. And one of the chapters that I share is on sincerity, and building a sincere organization, of having this idea of what I define as sincerity is intentional honesty, being intentional about your honesty along the way. And it talks about the chapter talks about this idea of there's a fun game called Knights and Knaves, and it's a kind of like a dinner party game that you'd play with friends. And the idea is, the knaves are essentially it can tell lies and truths, and the knights can only tell truths. And so someone is decided to be kind of has to figure out who are the knights and who are the knaves, and you have to do this through asking questions, and it's kind of a fun little game. And then you can spice things up a little bit by adding either excuse me, the knaves can only tell lies. I messed this up. The knaves can only tell lies, the knights can only tell truth, and you have to figure out who is which person is which. And then you spice things up a little bit in this game by adding alternators or spies or normals, and these are characters that can tell truths and lies. They can do both. And the comparison for the game is saying, well, if you ideally could build an organization from the ground up and you could choose to hire a bunch of knights, you would probably do that, right? You'd say, how can we hire people who are only honest and who are only forthright in what they're doing? It would be awesome to have a company full of knights. You definitely would not want that company full of knaves. But most organizations and most of us, we're not necessarily knaves, but we're also not necessarily knights. Even though we might think we're knights, we're probably one of these in between, these alternators, or where we can we tell truths and lies. We're a little bit of we're this mixed bag that's in the middle there. So how do we structure the question starts to look at how can we structure an organization or a business where we're bringing more knights or creating an environment that promotes and fosters knight-like behavior throughout the organization. It's unlikely to be perfect, but we're striving for that. So how do we get to those knights? How do we bring the best out of people? And then how can we identify the knaves or these dishonest folks that might be in our organization for the wrong reasons? How can we make sure we're not bringing those folks into our organization? And I've found over the years that a couple of ways we do that, but we talk about this as cultural alignment, having a culture, again, getting back to that center. If we know what that center is, we can share that and broadcast that to attract the knights for our company and repel the knaves for our company. And then for the folks that are in between that could fit or not fit, it just based on how we're training and supporting and developing this culture. Then all of a sudden we can look at this and say, well, how are we creating incentive packages, compensation packages, structures, bonus structures, things that we have the ability to control as leaders of a company? How can we structure this in such a way that it creates the kind of behavior that aligns with what's important to us as a company, as an organization? And so, years ago, early on in my career, I worked with a gentleman, and he used to say, he had a phrase that he would say that was, if you put the cheese behind the wrong door, you can't blame the mouse. And that
the
always,
rats.
yeah, or the rats. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that always stuck with me. That has always stuck with me. And so when I think about it, it's that same idea. How are you as a leader to set this up as a virtuous leader? Are you creating this virtuous organization by setting up a compensation structure that incentivizes the right behavior? And what is that right behavior? Well, every organization, right? It's going to be driven by what your center is. And then that incentivizes that versus the other. And I just think of an example. I owned a franchise for many years, where I was a multi-unit franchisee, and I was a semi-absentee owner. I run my consulting practice where I help companies franchise their business. That's mostly what I do day to day. But I was running this business, and it's very common in that industry to set up compensation structures based on a percentage of the project size for either sales reps or for project managers and for others involved. And so for the project manager, sales team, they're motivated or incentivized to make the project as large as possible. And then you have technicians that are generally paid hourly in the industry. And so their motivation is to get to overtime pay as quickly as possible. So stretching out a job a little bit longer here and there, they're motivated in that sense. And so when I was originally running the business that way, because I didn't, I was following, quote, what everyone else does. And then I stepped back. I said, well, I don't like the behaviors that are here, because if I have someone that is dishonest and as a sales rep or as a project manager, they are motivated to maybe make things look bigger than they are, or falsify records of some kind. And I didn't want that. I didn't like that. Or for the technicians to be stretching the job out, or not doing what they're not showing up on time, or taking longer than they promised the customer. And so I said, well, what would be a great way to motivate all of these parties to ultimately help the customer? Because that's what the core was. You're in these situations, they're very often in this restoration business. It's an emergency situation. Someone's house floods because a pipe breaks, or a tree fell on their roof during a rainstorm, and now the rain poured in and everything's soaking wet, or there was some kind of a fire or something, and now it needs to get cleaned. It was a kitchen fire, and it didn't, the house there didn't burn down, but it's got to get cleaned up and get the smoke smell out, and all of that. These are urgent situations. And so how could we do that? And so we put together a program, and something I helped that I developed was to say, well, what I really want is for a happy customer at the end of the day. And what does a happy customer want? Well, happy customer wants you to show up on time, wants you to do what you say you're going to do when you're there, wants to keep that customer informed of what's happening, because you're in her house and she wants to know what's going on with her house and what's happening, and explain it in such a way and help communicate if she's paying for it herself, or if insurance is involved, making sure you're communicating throughout the process and explaining what's going on. Well, what we decided to do was give a bonus to our team and staff based on a 5-star review, an online review, whether it was a Google or Yelp or wherever. If the team collectively, all parties involved on our team, got a 5-star review from a customer, then everybody got a bonus. Everyone involved on the project would win. Everybody wins. And this way, then the sales rep is not motivated solely by his own commission, or the project manager,
Right.
or the
So
technician.
they all had a new target to head for.
You got it. So
Okay.
that's some of the ideas, just as an example on some of that to share on how all of that flows together. And by the way, from doing that, it's amazing. I think it was, I forget how many 100% increase in total number of 5-star reviews. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, the business gets recognized as one of the best contractors of this kind in the state, in the whole state that we were based out of. We're top 5 based on reputation. And all of a sudden, we have a glowing reputation. Our referrals are increasing significantly, all from that one change to get everything aligned to the kind of business we actually wanted to run.
See, that makes sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess if I were a franchise or a franchisee, I would figure it out eventually, but probably not until I'd done a good bit of damage.
Sure. Yeah, and when you launch a business and start a business, right, as an entrepreneur, and I know different in starting my own businesses over the years, you make mistakes along the way. If you're gonna, as the old saying, if you're gonna make eggs, if you're gonna have scrambled eggs or
Make
make
an
a
omelet.
cake,
Yeah.
you got to crack some eggs, right,
Oh,
to
yeah.
get there. So that's part of the process. But then, as you're going through that process, to start looking back and say, what can we change, to have that reflective conversation, to reflect back so that you can look forward, right? So the reflection is to look forward, to say, what can we do differently, or how can we improve it? And part of the book's idea is to have these 300 questions, and you don't have to go through all of them. It's great if you do, but you take them in mini sections and chunks at a time, to talk through 5 or 10 of these at a time with your leadership team and others, to pose questions and think critically about it.
And I had a whole bunch of we talk about compassionate, you talk about an internal trait of I've got so many stickies on here. But what I really wanted to do is you talk about franchising, and you're well known in the franchising business. What inspired you to specialize in franchising?
That's a great question. My story, it is not all that different from most in franchising, which is we end up in franchising by accident. And so my first job right out of college uh, happened to be at a company that specialized, a consulting company that specialized in helping other businesses franchise and turn their business into a franchise, helping these entrepreneurs. And I knew I was a business management major in undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to get into management consulting. I have no idea why exactly. My best recollection is I had a professor that he was teaching, and he said also a management consultant, and I liked him. And I said, "Oh, that sounds pretty cool. I think I want to do that too." And so the first management consulting opportunity I had just happened to be at this firm that specialized in helping entrepreneurs turn their businesses into a franchise system. And so I fell in love with that. And that was, what was that? I guess that was in 2003, I guess that's been a long time ago, and just fell in love. Helping entrepreneurs. I love the idea of the American dream. I'm a big patriot, and I consider I consider myself and anyone that's here in the United States that we have a unique golden opportunity, that we have the ability to have an idea and have an idea and turn it into a business later today or tomorrow, and be up and running and create something like that. And so I consider it a great opportunity that we have here. And so have always admired entrepreneurs, and that they had the guts and the willingness to take some of these initial risks or initiatives to launch a business idea, and then to refine it over time and figure out how to serve and satisfy the customer. And then it married this great idea of helping an entrepreneur grow their business and expand it by helping what I call budding entrepreneurs. People who buy a franchise oftentimes are what I call a budding entrepreneur. They maybe would never start their own business if it weren't for a franchise model, that they could now buy a system that has proven processes and systems that they can take and launch on their own. And so I just fell in love with that, and I've been in the business pretty much ever since. I was hired out of consulting for a few years by a client of mine, but then ended up back in this space, and have been running my company now for, I guess, since 2010 that I started that. Or no, I'm sorry, 2016, not 2010, 2016.
And I have to ask, how did Big Sky franchise team come to be? Did that just kind of pop into your head, or was it a business plan? How did you do that?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, with Big Sky franchise team, I had a business partner for a few years, and we had really just a difference in vision and values. Really a large part of this Virtuous Business book. Our centers weren't aligned for the vision that we were looking to take the business, and then the things that were important to us, those values. What are those things that are important to us? And so we decided, let's part on good terms, and we did. It was an amicable split. And so then that's when I launched Big Sky. So it wasn't all this great, this epiphany moment that said, wow, let's go out and do it. I'm a bit of the classic a technician, where I had I was a specialist. I was an expert in a craft, and decided to start my own version of that eventually. So not all that different, I guess, for a mechanic that opens up a mechanic repair shop, or a lawyer, a CPA that eventually says, I think I want to do my own thing, and they open up their own practice. I was in the same vein there.
It's kind of lived experiences. It's probably not a good idea to just jump into something you really know nothing about. like I have done. Podcasting is one of them. I knew nothing about it at all, but I stuck to it and it worked. But had I just said, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I didn't, it was 18 and a half years ago. There was nobody to teach me a darn thing, but I needed to be consistent. And because of that, here we are. But I think what I just heard from you when you're talking is consistency is very important too. And I just
Y-
put that into your thought process, I think. But if you're really good at something and you can really be helpful to other people and you can be consistent with it, build a business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was and to be running for example with what you've been doing over 18 years of running a podcast, it is a labor of love to do that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and the big thing is what you said, it is consistency, right? Your audience has an expectation of, well, when does the next one drop, right? When's the next episode? And when you're consistent with what to expect, your audience is able to be prepared for that and know when it's going to come and share that with others then and share the message. And I look at the opposite end of that, and I think of I was recently helping an entrepreneur launch her business, and I she'd asked me to help mentor her, which I don't do often, but I was happy to do it. She's a real go getter, and when I started mentoring her, she was launching her business. We were having weekly meetings, and then all of a sudden, you know, she wasn't showing up for the weekly meeting, or she'd be 10 minutes late, and then she stopped showing up, and then slowly but surely things in the business weren't going the way they were supposed to either. And I thought, well, this is not a good sign. She's not consistently showing up for our meetings. That might mean she's not consistently showing up for clients or customers that are supposed to be served or helped with her business. And so, unfortunately, in that instance, the business kind of just faded away because she wasn't, sticking with it, as you said, Denise. It was great. She just wasn't consistent with it.
Listen, I had a friend years ago. He's passed away now, but he was an excellent jeweler, but he didn't show up. He had a very difficult home life, and his wife would call him screaming, yelling, and he would just put a sign on the door, I'll be back. People quit going. And he was talking to me one day and he said, I don't know. I'm losing customers, my old customers that have been with me for years, because he basically bought the store from his father in law, which had a very good reputation. He was set to succeed, but he didn't show up. He was not consistent with having those doors open. And I finally just sat down with him. I said, I'm going to tell you what I think the problem is. You're not going to like it. You may never speak to me again, but you need to show your ass up. If you're going to say you're open from 10 to 5, you cannot run and go buy lunch for your wife. Did he
That's
do it?
right.
No, he didn't. And the business eventually failed.
Yeah, and those stories are heartbreaking to me, and where it's just it didn't need to happen that way, right? It
It did
wasn't.
not. It was heartbreaking. It really was.
Yeah.
But you see this all the time. You'll go somewhere and say, oh, we'll be back in 15 minutes. Well, I won't. I'm
That
not going to wait 15 minutes. I'm not going to drive around the corner and come back. I'm gone. You've got, a lot of different places that I can choose from. I'm done. It
yes,
doesn't take
and
much. It can happen in that one moment. Unless you can say, I'm at a funeral and mean it, I'm not coming back.
that's right. Yeah, and I've seen this a lot, especially with entrepreneurs and owners that have been operating for a while, and now they're in their 60s, late 50s, into their 60s, maybe even into their 70s, and they're at a point where they're saying, "I am tired of doing this." And so they stop caring as much, and they stop fulfilling, they stop doing things, and then like you described with your friend, the business just starts fading away and fading away, and all of a sudden it's gone. Or I think of I've shared this story several times, but my dad was an entrepreneur. I watched him build a business, ran it for 30 some years, and when he reached a point where he was past the point of no return, where he just said, "I'm done with the business. I'm over it." And, and he just decided literally to essentially shut it down and sell off the assets and move on. And that breaks my heart for entrepreneurs, because you can, before you're ready to get to that essentially kind of kill point in the business, there's so many things you can do. And that's part of the reason I love what I do in helping entrepreneurs franchise their businesses, is because when they come to me, a lot of times they're at the juncture of saying, I'm interested, I want to get out of some of the day to day, or I'm ready for the next challenge. I want to do something that's a little more challenging, but they don't want to open up another one of whatever kind of business they're running. They don't want to open another territory or another location. They're tired of some of that day to day stuff. They want kind of what's next. And so franchising helps, solve that problem for them and give them that next challenge and a solution to start working them out of the day to day of their daily business. So that's one of the things I like about franchising too, is it starts to give them an exit strategy.
Yeah, just not showing up is not an exit strategy, and you can't sell a business that people don't wanna come into anymore.
That's exactly right. Yes. And selling it's fine. It's a viable thing. What most owners don't realize is that selling your business might take a year, 1 to 2 years. It could be 6 months to a year just to get the business shaped up and ready to go, and another year or 18 months to sell it. So it's usually a long cycle, and unfortunately I've seen most of the owners I've seen that end up looking to sell, they're almost more desperate. They're saying, I need out. I want to get out of this thing. I'm tired. For some reason, and they're expecting to sell the business in 90 days. And that's just not how it works. I remember there was a study I saw it's been years ago, and I'm sure the numbers have changed, but I would guess not all that much, that it takes on average about a year to sell an existing business. And that makes sense if you think about selling a business. Like, wow, that's a big undertaking for some buyer to come in to look to purchase.
Well, and there's, all the other things that come with it. You have to talk to the accountants, you have to talk to the city. "Can I buy this business?" "What's going on?" There's so many moving points, and people they can't just throw open the door and say, "Hey, I'm for sale." There's a lot of work that goes into that.
That's right.
A lot. Listen, I wanted to we are running out of time, and I wanted to ask you to come back again in the new year if you would, because I
Sure.
really wanted to go deeper with franchising.
I would love to.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good. You couldn't tell me no because I asked you on the radio. It's strictly I know, but I've got all kinds of questions about franchising. I'm fascinated by it, and every once in a while I think, "Oh, I'll open franchise," and then I don't, but I still keep looking at it. And I love what you're doing. I mean, I know you're consulting, you're talking about just how your book can help with franchising. So the virtuous business. So let's go back and talk about that next year, if you don't mind.
I would love to. Let's do it.
Good, 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 good. Well, listen, thank you for being with us, Tom, today. I mean, I've been muted a lot because I'm like, ooh, and I'm scribbling. I've been taking notes like crazy. But what is one lesson from virtuous business that every entrepreneur should implement immediately today?
I would say the one thing to take a look at from the book itself, and I talked a lot about it, is really think about what is your driver? What is the core of your business? And it comes out a lot today is, oh, what's my purpose? What's my
What's
mission
my
statement and
why? Yeah,
what's
what's
my
my
why and all of that. Yeah, sometimes that gets overdone. I want you to think about what's a center. When you're making a decision, what are what are things that you're ruling out right away that's not important? And sometimes it's the ruling out, and other times it's to look at, well, what are you considering as you're making that really important decision? What are you considering? Is it your time? Is it the money? Is it the relationships with your family or loved ones or your staff or employees, or what is it? And figure out what that center is and use that as a guidepost. It really is going to help drive it. And reflect back out of this book. I think the discussion questions, the 300 more than 300 questions, are worth it in of itself just to have some conversations with people at your company and just start talking about these ideas to build the business that you want to design and create.
You know what I find helpful when I'm looking at different things that just are not working for me? And there's always something. I will ask, and I had a business coach ask me this many, many years ago. She was listening to me whine and cry, and I was waiting for her to fire me. I really thought she was going to. She got real quiet one day and she said, Denise, I went, oh, she's going to fire me. And she said very quietly, what are you tolerating? And that changed everything for me. What do you
Hmm.
tolerate? I ask myself that daily because I want to clean out the clutter.
That's a great question to ask. Absolutely.
Okay, one more question. Where can listeners find out more about you, your work, and your book? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, the best place to go for the book, and we have free downloads, free questions, and even a study group guide on how to run a study discussion or just a discussion group on this is just virtuousbusinessbook.com. Virtuousbusinessbook.com. You can download the free resources. And of course, if you just want a copy of the book, it's available at Amazon or any online retailer that you prefer.
Got it. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you really wanted to share today?
I don't think so because we're going to talk about it on the next show. So
We are.
I'm looking forward to that conversation.
It's a good deflection. I'm proud of you. So that worked. Well, listen, everybody, building a successful business isn't simply about getting bigger. It's about creating systems, leadership, and values that can grow without losing what made your company successful in the very first place. And Dr. Tom DuFore reminds us that, excuse me, franchising is not the answer for every business. And we'll talk about that more the next time he's here. But when approached thoughtfully and strategically, it can become an incredible vehicle for long term growth. And his emphasis, particularly in the book, on I'm losing my voice, on ethical leadership, continuous improvement, and creating win win relationships offers valuable lessons for every entrepreneur, whether they ever franchise or they're like me, they're on their own, they're solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. And listen, we thank you for being with us here on your Partner in Success Radio. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode, and visit Tom's website to learn more about franchising, his consulting work, and his book, Virtuous Business, a Model Approach. And until next time, remember that success is achieved one intentional decision at a time. Excuse me. I am Denise Griffitts. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Tom, thank you.